Okay, for this session I'm working on SimpleArchiver. I'm adding behavior based on chunked encoding in version 7 file format. By default, when you are archiving with compressor and with file format 7, it directly writes to the output file or the output every chunk of data received from the pipe from the compressor. The change I'm introducing is enforcing the output to always be maximum size for every mini chunk, except for the last, which is probably a partial size of the max size. Currently, the maximum possible size of the mini chunk is set to 32 kilobytes, or kibibytes, or whatever. So that's what this session is going to do. The first thing I decided to do is to set up a constant for 32 kilobytes instead of writing 32 times 1024 manually elsewhere in the code. They call this a code smell of magic numbers. They call it magic numbers not because they're magic, but more like you're putting number literals in the code, and that's kind of difficult to read sometimes to understand the intent of the programming. By using a constant with a legible and understandable name, you avoid having the problem, the code smell known as magic numbers. Thirty-two kilobytes, as I mentioned before, is the maximum mini chunk size for file format version 7 in SimpleArchiver. I'm adding a buffer to hold about a lot of data, thinking about using a single buffer for two buffers. Basically, when I want to enforce the maximum size of every mini chunk, it's going to pool data until it reaches 32 kilobytes. The problem is that I could be at 1 byte below 32 kilobytes and then receive a 32 kilobyte chunk. So per buffer, I would need actually about 2 times 32 kilobytes roughly, or 64 kilobytes. And I'm going to use this like a double buffer, so that's why I'm setting the hold size to 4 times 32 kilobytes. Because when I write the 32 kilobyte chunk, mini chunk, there may be remaining data. So I copy the remaining data to the offset of the second half of the hold buffer. The first half is 64 kilobytes, and the second half is 64 kilobytes. And that's just the design of it, really. Using it as a double buffer and ensuring that it can hold 32 kilobytes and 32 kilobytes minus 1. Just to handle every possible case of different sized chunks of data received from the compressor. So if you use a variable in an if statement without equality, if it's an integral value, 0 is false and everything that's non-zero is true. So I could just put is first half in an if statement, and as long as it's non-zero, it would show up as true. I use it to either index into the beginning of the hold buffer or halfway through the hold buffer. When I'm storing data from the buffer into the hold buffer, I have to offset by the index counter so that it doesn't overwrite previously written data, because the index counter keeps track of the size of the data in the buffer. Again, using ternary expression. First part of it is the boolean. The second part is if its boolean is true. And the third part is if the boolean is false. So it's boolean question mark expression 1 question mark or colon and then expression 2. Ternary, 3 parts. So after data is written to the hold buffer, if there's enough data in the hold buffer to write 32 kilobytes, it writes the hold buffer's 32 kilobyte content and then swaps the data to the opposite half of the hold buffer if there was remaining data. Here, the base 10 number should be 32 kilobytes, not read ret, or the return value from the read command, or function, that is. I fixed that later. I also need to set the offset if it's the first half or the second half. I think I fixed that later, this part. This part of the code handles copying over remainder data from one side of the hold buffer to the other side. So there's more than one place where I have to handle chunked encoding. So I'm adding the behavior here as well. In the top right pane, there should be an error returned. I think I handled that as well. Yeah, here. Ensuring that all the error paths return an error struct. Now just some building and testing. So at the time of this session, there's a bug in the code that prevents it from our compressing properly, which is well, it's not the compressor's fault. It's the fault of my code that I fixed recently at the time of this voice recording, not at the time of the session. Basically, long story short, the compressor's data, using the behavior of writing full mini chunk size mini chunks, somehow has a bug that prevents the data from being, well, it causes the data received from the compressor to be malformed when written to the archive. If you can spot the bug, then good job. I fixed it recently in the repository so you could check if you thought you fixed the right thing. Here I'm making sure that the file's compressed size stat is properly set to when it writes the mini chunks. So the bug I mentioned earlier, if you can find the bug, then cool. It's fixed right now in the repository. But yeah, it's a very annoying bug considering it took a while for me to figure it out. Yeah, that bug that caused the different compressor to fail. Um, like I said before, I fixed it by now, but it's kind of a pain having to watch myself struggle over it right now in the session without yet having fixed it in the session. Now just double checking the hex editor, double checking with the hex editor to see that that the chunk size, mini chunk size is properly set. So the hex editor showed that the mini chunk sizes were being written in the proper places. The bug that I was encountering I only fixed much later. Just double checking the code again. So that's basically it for this session. I, at this point, commit the changes and push. So thanks for watching.